Hello, everybody, and welcome back to As Planned. I am Mike Bograd. With me, we have a very special guest, Stelic Vice President Stu Meny. How are you doing, Stu?
Good about yourself.
Doing good. So today we're going to have, I think, a conversation that you and I have talked about a bunch. Um, it's near and dear to your heart. I know you specialize in this. You're probably uh, one of the best at the companies that do this. And the topic is public pursuits versus private pursuits. Um, and you know where I stand on Stelic and how we and if we should do public pursuits. What are your thoughts on
Y
public versus private? I guess
Yeah, I mean, I'd
maybe
say,
you
it
explain it
it
to
always
the team. What is a public pursuit versus a private pursuit? You're probably better at that than anyone. What is it?
yeah, well, I mean, a public pursuit is anything involved usually with kind of a state, local, or federal agency, while private, usually, we're talking about the commercial sector in the lines of, private type industry, in your life science and and your other type of market segments. But public usually is a competitive bid process where I would say little easier, a little less competitive, and a little bit of a different approach from a business development standpoint when you're talking about public versus private.
What makes it less competitive? That was something you
Well, it's a
mentioned. Mhm.
yeah, it's all how you approach it, right? So, I would say public, they in their arena, they have to bid out the work. They could bid out the work a lot of different ways. They could go small business, they could go 8A, they could go full and open. But when you're talking about, private or commercial type, if you have a good or pre-existing relationship with that firm, then they can sole source work to you. They don't need to compete it out as long as you're within a competitive range that they deem acceptable.
And, internal to Stelic, we have the development meetings. We meet, try to figure out what's the best path forward for us as a company, where we want to pursue. Early on, we definitely work hard to get on the GSA schedule, right? Which is a big process. I don't know if you want to take the 30-second elevator pitch. What is getting on the GSA schedule?
Yeah, getting on the GSA schedule, basically it's they pre-negotiate rates with specific companies, but it allows companies to actually go after certain schedules, or they get on certain schedules and go after specific work. If you're not on those schedules, or you're not approved or on the GSA schedule, on in specific areas, then you don't have access to those competitive procurements. So you can't even go after those competitive procurements unless you're kind of a subcontractor, or a partner of somebody who's priming that.
I feel very passionate about pursuing work, public work, going after public pursuits. Stu, why don't you align with me on this? This is what Pedro is looking for. Why are we not pursuing public work after almost 2.5 years at stuff? What's going on?
Right. So to set yourself up, right, as a small business, really, when you're going after public procurements, they ask for a couple of different things. One is a management approach, which most companies have, and can take care of that. But the other types of, they're looking for personnel, and they're looking for past performances. So, and a lot of times those past performances, those need to be completed. They want to know that you can actually complete the work, that it's been done. And if they go back, or request, how you've done in those projects to specific people, that they come back and you've done them correctly, you've done them right, and you get a good kind of score. Now, in the federal procurement world, when you actually finish a public job, at least with the GSA, you get something called CPARs. So they'll actually score you on that. And the more you can kind of build up, it's like call it a snowball rolling down the hill. The more past performance you can build up, the easier it's going to be to go after specific work. Now, in the competitive environment, on public work, a lot of companies will have direct experience in a specific job, a specific market segment. So it is very important, I would say, that when you're having a go no go process, that you're asking yourself these questions on, how set up you are for success, how direct your experience is, as it pertains to whether you're priming, as it pertains to whether you're subbing, what do you bring to the table as a company? And just to kind of circle back, it is very difficult for small businesses to get going in the federal world because they need to get those three procurements. It's kind of a chicken and an egg argument. How do I go after federal government work or procurement work if I don't have that experience? Well, how do I get that experience if I'm never chosen? It's really one of the reasons why the 8A program was instituted. It allows the government to kind of sole source some of the work. Seems like they're going away from that a little bit. But the earlier I would say a small business can get those three past performances and those three procurements in a specific area, it opens up a lot of doors once you complete. So, Mike, you just said we're 2.5 years in, right? We are coming to close on some of those projects, which will allow us now to start going after some of that federal procurement work in volume.
And I think one of the tough parts, and it maybe didn't register with me early on when we were first doing public pursuits, was it has to be three past performances in that specific industry. It's not just three projects. It's if you're doing life sciences, if there's a government job for infrastructure, it has to be for infrastructure project. You can't submit a manufacturing job as your past performance.
Yeah, and you can, right? You just won't get selected. So,
Yeah. So I guess for
but
us,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. So to your point, and it really depends on what they want out of the past performance. It could be, different sizes of the project. It could be programs. It could be industry. It could be a combination of different types of things. So it's really important, like I said, when you're going through that go no go process, to really look at that because again, and assess your competition in some of these pre-bid meetings and things like that, just to assess the kind of chance you have in winning the work.
do you think, for Stelic, do you think there is going to be what do you think is the balance for public versus private pursuits, or I guess projects that we manage as a company?
Yeah, so I mean, the balance is wherever you feel like you can win the most work, you want to go after. I would say, business development really isn't a volume game. It's really, you want to ask yourself three questions. Where do you compete? Whether you compete, and what is the price? Can we actually, can we win the work, and can we actually be profitable on that work? We don't want, there's folks out there that will go after 100 different pursuits with a 5% win rate. That's not something, I really strive for. I really want to focus on, kind of I would say those 10 projects that we can go after where we have a 50% win rate or a 33% win rate. Otherwise, you're going to have a really tough time with managing your overhead, managing your proposal teams, and it's going to get real expensive real fast if you're just throwing anything at the wall and seeing what sticks. So now I will say this, even though, Stelic right now is coming to a close with a lot of these projects, we've been doing a lot of work on the front end, right, with public pursuits. It doesn't mean you have to stop doing business development to develop relationships, to develop, a marketing approach when it comes to public pursuits, going to conferences, getting your name out there. So that doesn't have to stop. That can start right away as a small company. And so hopefully, 18 to 36 months down the road, when you do have some of those completed past performances, you're going to be able to go out to some of these different agencies moving forward, and they're going to already know your company name. You're going to already have a pre-existing relationship, which is going to make you a lot more competitive when you actually submit a proposal.
Are there companies, could there be a company that only does public work? If we said, hey, moving forward, Stelic will only pursue public work, how would that look? And what kind of competitive space would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to definitely change our approach a little bit, but again, it's just a matter of where are these public clients? Where are they at? What kind of conferences are they in? So it's a different it's going to different events, different trajectory. But I would say the BD approach itself is kind of the same thing. You want to develop those relationships. You want to get out in front of procurements. You want to understand funding, whether it be federal, whether it be commercial. You want to understand that stuff, 15, 18 months in advance. So ahead of time when these procurements are coming out. You want to develop strategic partnerships as well. There are a number of companies maybe in the competitive landscape that might be going after these public pursuits. Maybe you bring something to the table as a subcontractor, as a strategic partner that nobody else has. So going and develop these strategic partnerships, developing these bid teams to go after this work in advance is super important in setting the table to win some of this work.
We've worked on a lot of high profile projects, a lot of data center jobs, a lot of life science manufacturing projects that have wrapped up, and a lot of times we sign an NDA that requires confidentiality. How do we leverage those as during the public pursuit process?
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes those NDAs will, I would say, will go away after the project is complete. Other times, if you have a good relationship with some of the folks on those projects, you can ask them to give you a past performance review. You can request that, hey, a public entity is going to be reaching out and request information on how we perform those jobs. Would you mind doing that? So it really comes down to, if you didn't perform well in the project, you're probably not going to have a great relationship. So the key is, number one, performing well, executing well on the project. The rest kind of falls into place. If you execute well on the project, most clients will have no problem giving you a good past performance grade, and have no problem helping you out in another pursuit moving forward.
Good to go.
One.